This episode, we wrap up our series on defensive football and dive deep into D-line play, along with videos around the NFL. Welcome to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Our expert analysis on matchups and statistics will give you the edge in betting and on your friends. Use our insights to predict NFL outcomes like nobody else and always be the smartest guy in the room. Listen more for thoughts on Tua saying "show me the money" to a group of Dolphins fans after adding to the long list of quarterbacks getting rich. Is it a good look? Later, we dive in deep into D-line play, and we'll give you some bounce back and breakout stars to look for in 2024. And finally, listen all the way to the end for a preview of our new offensive metric, threat rate. It'll change how you think about offense. The Matchup by Field Vision Sports, where we're breaking down the NFL from all angles. It is 35 days until football season, literally exactly 5 weeks. We're excited for it, as we know all of you are. I'm your host, Sasha Bushka, joined by our Director of Football Ops, Cody Alexander, and the Chief Man, Scott Bushka. Fellas, how we doing today?
Sasha, your voice is extra booming today. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Did you notice that too, Cody?
Yes, it was definitely booming.
Yeah, what'd you do when you got up? Did you have something special for breakfast?
I did not. I didn't sleep very well last night for whatever reason. So I was up and at 'em early today, but I have had a couple of Americanos today, maybe just recently, like right before we hopped on. So maybe I'm just a little amped up, or I'm taking direction from my boss and getting it fired up here on the pod.
Yeah, you're all hopped up on caffeine. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like if it hit me this week, where like maybe it's because it's August 1st, but it's like we're in football season, and I got ESPN talking about training camps, and I got ridiculous take Twitter videos going on, which I know we're going to talk about. So I feel like we're there, guys. 35 days, like let's go.
That's right.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. And 35. I mean, I was thinking about it with today being Thursday. It's exactly 5 weeks until the first game. When you start talking about 5 weeks, that's basically a month. So we're right there. Cody, do you have any, like, this wasn't planned, but it just kind of came to me. Do you have any, like, start of the football season traditions? Like anything you do to get yourself jacked up for football season when it gets there?
I think it's just heat acclimation. You just start. I feel like I get more and more drawn outside more than anything. Like I get this antsy feeling. Like even though I haven't coached in like 2 years, I feel like I need to go outside randomly in the middle of the day. Oh, I need heat acclimation, or I got my water bottle full all the time. Like hydrate. That's kind of the ritual around this time of the year.
Yeah,
Sasha, it's such a good question. I thought for sure in the Alexander household there was some type of like weird sacrificial ritual on like the first day of football season, you know, like where Cody makes his kids like burn and pour incense over a football or something like that.
Or just a family Oklahoma drill in the middle of the living room.
Exactly. From what I can tell, Bo would win.
Yeah, and Bo actually has been pushing the quote-unquote sled. We have this big ottoman, and he's been pushing it now for a couple of weeks. He's 6 years old. He actually is the random 6-year-old that likes blocking more than he does running the ball, and he's really good at both.
So at one point in a previous season, Scott had told me that Kyler Murray kind of looks like a little kid running from his parents when he scrambles in the pocket. And so that's a good transition into the NFL QBs. 6-year-olds pushing ottomans and Kyler Murray running from people in the pocket. But we're not going to talk about Kyler Murray. Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa, since the last time we spoke, became very rich men. Just general thoughts from each of you on like this next man up. I will say they both only got 4 years instead of 5 years, which has been kind of the going rate. Tua, it's not really a sample size thing. It's a health thing. With Jordan Love, it's like, yeah, you had 8 good games, but do we want to commit to 5 years off of that? But each of them got the over 50 million annual average value. I guess I'll frame it this way. Is it right that the next quarterback up always kind of gets the next biggest deal, or at least close to it, or should it work more like other positions?
Yeah, I think that with Tua, I think we have an understanding that he fits that offense so well. And then Love is the unknown. And so, in terms of like resetting the market, do these guys need to reset the market? I think the problem that we all have is like Mahomes did that crazy deal a while back, understanding like, I know I'm not going to be the highest paid guy. So it's just shocking when we have guys that we don't necessarily think is like the elite guy getting these mega contracts. But at the end of the day, they both deserve that contract because who the hell else is going to play quarterback for them?
Yeah. I totally agree, Cody. I'm personally like over the quarterback market because it's so predictable. It's just like, okay, next guy up is going to get top or like 0.1 more than the top. I guess Tua got slightly less, which is a little bit of a slap in the face to him. But it's like, A, it's not interesting because they all get it. And B, even though Tua is way worse than Mahomes or Tua is way worse than Josh Allen or well, I was going to say Joe Burrow, although like our threat rate would tell us there might be some questions there. Like it doesn't matter because the Dolphins don't have a choice. What are they going to do? Not sign him and be like, hey, let's like take
roll the dice on Shadur Sanders.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's roll the dice on Shadur Sanders, or even worse, like start Skylar Thompson, which I was going to give some strays to K-State fans just because we're KU fans here. But yeah, you don't have any other choice. So
you use that term we liberally, but
yeah, I like Jordan Love and his potential more than I do Tua, just because I think he's got more upside. But yeah, both these teams had to do those deals.
Yeah, I think a couple of things on the Mahomes not being the highest paid. I don't know like all the black magic that goes into the salary cap and restructuring and all of that, but I did read something about him having like the highest like 4-year cash flow of all quarterbacks for the next 4 years. And I don't know what it means, but it sounds like it's good for him. So I don't think he's too worried about it. But then on the Jordan Love thing, I think it brings up like a whole nother can of worms, a whole nother point is like everybody wants, not everybody because it's hard to do, but a lot of people love this idea of a rookie QB sitting behind a veteran for a couple of years. Look at Michael Penix and in the Kirk Cousins situation in Atlanta and what they're trying to do. And obviously, Green Bay's made it work a couple of times now. But the way these rookie contracts are structured, if you were going to sit a guy 3 years, you were always going to have to make a decision on his contract
right
before you wanted to, really, or before you had seen as much as you wanted to. So there's a lot of complications that go into not playing a rookie quarterback right away, or at the very least, if you sit him more than 1 year, it's hard to make an informed decision.
And I think like it's such an outlier with Green Bay. And then when the rookie contract comes in, I mean, now it's pretty much standard practice. I think we're going to actually start seeing people draft and dump quarterbacks. Like it's kind of started with like, I thought Josh Rosen will end up going down as like way ahead of the time of like Kingsbury didn't want him, dump him, move on to Kyler Murray. I think we're going to start seeing that too. And people take more chances because the way that cap is structured, if you're not on a rookie contract or you don't have a big cash pocket that you can push down the road, you're going to have a rookie quarterback and he's going to have to hit. And like you said, Sasha, he has to hit now, not year 3, not year 4. We're not going to make a decision. We've already cycled through our whole team by that point.
Yeah, that's the tough part. But then you look at like when it works, like if Caleb Williams works in Chicago, they were able to give DJ Moore that deal because they're paying a rookie quarterback. And you look at like Tristan Wirfs just got his new deal in Tampa. They've got a slight discount on Baker Mayfield just because he hasn't been like a superstar in the league, and they signed him this offseason. So if you can get a rookie quarterback to hit within their first 2 years, now you're cooking with gas and you're a real title contender. It's just so hard. I think like by the second year they're starting now pretty well, but that doesn't, just because like whether they are what they are, it doesn't mean they've reached their full potential yet. Trevor Lawrence got a huge deal this offseason. I think the Jaguars are hoping that he hasn't reached his full potential yet, because if he has, he's probably not a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah, totally. And you like the key word in that everything you said, Sasha, is if the first round quarterback works out, because like history tells us that okay, what do we have? Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, all in the first round, all in the top 12 picks.
JJ McCarthy.
Oh, sorry, JJ McCarthy too. So 6 guys. History tells us 3 of those for sure are not going to be that good. And you're going to be lucky if the other 3 of them turn out to be as good as a Trevor Lawrence, Tua, or Jordan Love, right?
Yeah. Or if it's the Trey Lance, Zach Wilson draft, maybe none of them will be any good. So, I mean,
you say that as Cody wears a Broncos hat. Yeah. Zach Wilson throwing darts in training camp. Cody, you excited
Zach
about
Wilson
it?
already got demoted to third string. They just skipped his reps the other day. So,
hey, I'm all for Jared Stidham.
Jared Stidham. All right. I mean, if for your sake, I would just hope that Bo Nix wins that job.
Yes,
because if Bo Nix isn't good enough to win that job, maybe he will be eventually, but hopefully he's good enough to win that job for your sake. Did either of you see the video of Tua at training camp after he got his deal, like saying "Show me the money" to the Dolphins fans?
It's hilarious.
Another in a long line of stupid training camp videos.
Yes.
Yeah, I did see that, and the whole time, and it also seemed like it was planned by their PR team because you had like a lady out there like handing him the mic, and I'm like, why would you possibly do that? Why would you plan that? Anyways,
it was interesting to say the least. It kind of brings up a whole nother point of like stuff coming out of training camps, videos coming out of training camps. I think it's just like it goes to show. I mean, we started out the pod talking about it being 35 days until football season, and people don't want to wait 35 more days. So they're just like, did Mahomes throw any dimes to Xavier Worthy today? Did the Steelers get in a fight at training camp today? Did anyone accidentally hit a quarterback today, which led to the Steelers fight? So any unique or funny videos that you guys have seen out there coming out of training camps that you'd like to talk about? I have one in mind, but I'll save it.
In my mind, it's like a whole genre that primarily centers around rookie receivers.
Yes.
Because like I feel
George
like
Pickens still.
Or George Pickens, yeah. But I mean, it can probably be receivers in general, but it's like so this year it's Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman in Buffalo, and
who did the Chargers take? They've shown Ladd McConkey. They've been
Ladd
showing
McConkey. McConkey. I was listening to a podcast the other day where it's basically like the person on this podcast was just assuming that Ladd McConkey was going to be as productive as Julian Edelman. And I'm like, that seems like a leap to say that Ladd McConkey is already as good as the Super Bowl MVP.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if you're just looking at Edelman's first 3 or 4 years, because it took him a while to break in, but it's a good
so
point.
There's like the other day I saw one of Ricky Pearsall catching a ball one hand, and it's like, oh my God, the league's in trouble. League's gonna get cooked. And also Keon Coleman, the Buffalo fans, we love you, Buffalo fans, but they're like every single half speed throw that Josh Allen throws to Keon Coleman and he catches with 2 hands or 1 hand, either way, it's like the league is cooked, the league's in trouble. Watch out, Chiefs. So yeah, that's my favorite genre of them.
Yeah. It's like when you get all the draft content and now we don't have the draft. So what do people do? They just shift over to doing hot takes with like, one-handed catches. Typically, my favorite is always the one that's like, it's a bad throw, but the receiver adjusts to it, makes a one-handed catch, and the DB's literally standing there. Like people have no idea of context in practice. Like these are offensive drills half the time that we're seeing. And so like the defenders are not playing this at all. My favorite one was like everybody taking a shot at Xavier Worthy. He looked like a pink, ding, 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 ding. Look, like I don't think people understand like talent differential at the NFL. Like it's razor thin. Like the number 5 receiver and the number 1 receiver, typically, like unless you got a future Hall of Famer, there's really not that much. I mean, we're talking like just a few different attributes, but like at the college level, the talent differential is so huge. Even at the Power 5 level, now Power 4. So like it'll be an adjustment period, but typically, everybody's like, oh, he's the next John Ross, or and then on the opposite end, you have Mahomes throwing like 70-yard bombs, and now the whole NFL's cooked. So it's like, which one is it? Is it he can't get off press, or is it Mahomes that's going to throw 70-yard bombs like it's going out of style?
Yeah. Cody, that's such a good call. I did love when he ran into that linebacker, and the guy literally like barely tried, and he flew like a. Speaking of little kids, he flew like if you were throwing your kid on a bed.
Yes.
Yeah. I've got one that's from like, and then we'll transition out of this conversation and get into some defensive stuff, especially since we've got Cody. It's in a kind of a different genre than training camp videos, but it's a video nonetheless. I saw a dude, like, he used that TikTok voiceover that they use when they're talking about like really serious stuff, and basically put out like, I've got a Chiefs wide receiver for you that's a rookie, and it's not who you're thinking. That could be a top 10 fantasy option this year, and it's not Xavier Worthy, they used high draft capital on. And then like he's setting it all up. You're like, who is he talking about? Like there's no one else. And then on pops a video of Lewis Reese Zammit playing rugby, and they're like, this guy could be a top 10 option in fantasy this year. And I'm like, last I checked, they're not playing rugby in the NFL, and he might not even make the team.
Right.
I mean, Cody, we were talking about this last weekend, but if you watch him run, he's like standing up. Like I'm waiting for the first video of like a linebacker to get a hold of him in a hole and just like pick him up and pile drive him into the ground.
Yeah, like rugby's so different than football. Just everything is different. You talk to any rugby people, they'll tell you like it's not the same game, and definitely running style. Like NFL is completely. You go up too high, I mean, they're just going to eat your chest with their shoulder pad, and it only takes one time though, Scott. It only takes one time to go sit the end up in a hole and get punched in the chest. You can't breathe for like 5 minutes to figure out you might need to lean forward a little bit.
Yeah, I promised I'd get us out of this segment, but I think it's relevant with the Olympics going on. A lot of people are paying attention to that. Did you guys see the last second score by the women's USA rugby team to win on like a walk-off over Australia to get a medal? I have more respect for rugby than ever before after watching a few of these matches.
Yeah, that play was amazing. Those girls are studs. I don't know if that's the right term or you're supposed to use that term, but like they're amazing athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing they don't have in rugby is a defensive line, though. So we're going to continue the conversation. It's D-line week at Field Vision as far as the content we're putting out. So on the other side, we'll talk D-line 3-4, 4-3 schemes, run stopping, pass rushing. We'll get into the weeds a little bit. You're listening to The Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Stay with us. Use our insights to predict NFL outcomes like nobody else and always be the smartest guy in the room. Welcome back into The Matchup by Field Vision Sports. We're excited to have you here with us. Did some news and notes around the league off the top, talked about training camp videos, had a little fun. But at this portion of the offseason, we've been talking a lot about defense here on Field Vision Sports. We went through defensive backs into off-ball linebackers, and this week's kind of the defensive line theme of the week. And we've broken that up into kind of categories of edges, interior defensive linemen. So I'm going to start with this. One of the things we did a lot of in the last week as we're breaking these guys down is talk about run stopping versus pass rushing. And we did that on off-ball linebackers as well, and also coverage. But I want Cody, if you can just talk a little bit about like the difference and what it means when you have a guy who's really good at both.
Yeah, I think most people just assume like when we talk about just any kind of defensive lineman that it's going to be about pass rush. And I think that you lose kind of that element and that toughness of the run. Like I think we're starting to go back. The pendulum always swings back. I think people are starting to have a healthier respect for run, whether it's on offense or on defense. Look, if you can't stop the run, it really doesn't matter what they're doing in the passing game. They can just control the game and they're going to win. And if we look at it this offseason, who got the big paydays? It wasn't the edges have not really been the ones breaking the bank, right? It's been the interior defensive linemen breaking the bank. And so I think we're seeing kind of that pendulum swing back. Yes, a guy like Chris Jones, who is just an animal in the pass rush. Aaron Donald's a great one, but the caveat with Aaron Donald was he was just as good against the run as he was against the pass. So when you look at it, whether it's an edge or an interior defensive lineman, you really want to look at it. Who the top guy should be a complete player. It should be a guy that's great in the pass and in the run.
I wish that Aaron Donald wouldn't have retired before we developed havoc ratings, because he might have broken the whole system.
Yeah.
Just the outlier, just like all the way to the top. I mean, Max Crosby is probably, this is going to sound crazy, but like Max Crosby is probably the closest thing that we have right now. Just somebody that's just so good against the run and so good in the pass rush, but no one interior wise like Aaron Donald.
Yeah. I was just going to say it's interesting. And I know we talked about this a little bit last week with linebackers. But it's interesting to think about this idea of like players that complement each other versus players that are super versatile and can do everything. Right. Because like Chris Jones, I think maybe still highest paid interior D lineman, right? He got a huge contract in the offseason, but like what our havoc ratings would tell us, and you see this with your eyes, is like he is not a dominant run defender, right? But he's obviously like by far and away creates the most interior pressure as a defensive tackle. And so like I think what the Chiefs have tried to do is build run stoppers on the line around him. Even with their DNs and their edges, right? Or like big bodies who can stop the run as well as rush the passer. Yeah. But then when you think about a guy like Max Crosby, he does both. And, Cody, in the article you wrote, you got, which I'm sure surprised some people, but you've got Max Crosby as the best edge in the league because he does play the run and the pass more so than all those other guys. So I don't know. It's just like in my mind, it's actually fine to do either. You can have a really versatile guy who's good at both, or you can build complements, but you got to take one of those two strategies.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think like just from a versatility standpoint, gone are the days of a guy like a Vince Wilfork, who just eats up a ton of space, or was he just that unique of an athlete that you could put a guy that big out there and he could still hold his own? And who would you say is the closest in the league to a guy like that right now?
Oh, well, that one's an easy one. That's Dexter Lawrence for the Giants. I mean, dude's 340 pounds. He's good at rushing the passer. If he can man up on a center and he can win that. If he gets double teamed, he can hold that up. He's great against the run. He's above average, if not good. We're closing in on really good in the pass rush. And he's just, that's a guy, we talked about aliens the other week of like, he's 341 pounds and he can play three technique. And I don't think people understand like how insane that is. A three technique is usually what you would call it's the old quick tackle, right? You got one-on-one with a guard. That's the guy. Like Chris Jones is a great example of. He's pretty much a pure quick tackle, like a Warren Sapp. Like we're just worried about pass rush. We'll stop the run on the way to the quarterback, whole type deal. But Lawrence at the Giants, I mean, that guy is a plugger, but then on the other hand, he can also be serviceable inside in the pass rush.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I think like a lot of these interior defensive linemen, serviceable in pass rush is one thing, but unless you're a guy who's out there collecting sacks, it's not completely unlike their counterparts on the offensive line, which is there's not a ton of stats accumulated with these guys, or sometimes there's not. And a lot of times they're taking up blocks to allow the linebackers to make tackles and things like that. So they get lost in the shuffle. But I think talent evaluators and people in the know and people doling out these contracts understand how valuable they are. And that's why you've seen a lot of interior D linemen getting big deals this offseason.
Yeah. And I think like we say this all the time, but the league is cyclical, and we're like at a macro offensive level, right? We're seeing teams say like, hey, if you're going to put 6 small DBs on the field, we're going to run the ball. And so I think like we're going to see offenses put a little bit more value in running the ball, actually invest in the running back a little bit more, which means the teams are going to have to counter with getting more of your Vince Wilforks, your Harrison Phillips, your Derek Browns like into the lineup.
It's a great point, because there's got to be a temptation on defense over the last several years to just like do the old NASCAR Giants thing, which is just put the 4 best pass rushers you can across the line, because that's what the teams want to do, and you need to collect sacks. But offenses can counter that, and the Giants weren't in that all the time, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. You just made me think of this, but like Nick Bosa, not on the top of our edge list, even though everyone thinks that he should be. Most important play of the Super Bowl, overtime, 4th and 1, right? Like, what did Andy Reid know he was going to do? Like, crash the pocket so Mahomes just pulls it and runs right around him.
Yeah. Yeah. You think, this is a lot of hypotheticals here, but I'll ask Cody this. You put Max Crosby in that same spot, does that play out the same way?
I think it does. You're talking about a guy who is, don't get me wrong. Like Nick Bosa is probably like, he's a freak. Just edge rush. I think what he's asked to do in that is not answer problems. Like I think that that's where the schematic differences come. And that wide 9 way that the 49ers play, they're paying those guys to go make sacks. They're paying those guys to cut off edge runs, put everything back inside. You could even argue last year, the 49ers really were kind of built like that Giants team with the 4 aces that y'all were talking about. They really didn't have a dominant inside, like nose plugger guy that you kind of need to stop the run. And so what it allows a team like the Chiefs, who don't have the greatest run game, they have a really good O-line, but they don't. And Pacheco, don't get me wrong, Pacheco's a battering ram. But what it can do is it really opens up that run game to kind of nickel and dime. And those, I think of it like boxing. Throwing the ball is like a haymaker. It's more like MMA. Like we're trying to knock you out in 30 seconds, right? If we're throwing bombs down the field, like I'm trying to throw haymakers. Whereas that having a run game allows that when there's a lull in the fight, right, that we can continue those body blows. So by the time it's the 4th quarter, like y'all are gassed, and then that's when the plays start coming. And I think that's where the whole running backs don't matter thing that happened about 5 years ago was just kind of overblown. This isn't 7-on-7, where this isn't just a purely passing league. Like you've got to be able to add value somewhere. And for linemen, it needs to be in the run game.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All great points. Good stuff. I want to get into like 3-4-4-3, but real quick, I think Max Crosby, I think what you're telling us is he's your favorite edge in terms of being able to play the pass and the run. So just short answer on interior defensive linemen, who does the best job of being able to do both and being the most versatile?
Well, DeForest Buckner is probably the number 1 guy on that list. And he usually doesn't get a lot of love because he's at the Colts, but he's really good at it. I think Derek Brown is serviceable enough in the passing game, but just he's so head and shoulders over everybody in the run game. But those 2 right there would be kind of what you would consider complete players in a sense of they can rush the passer at a above average level to good level, and then also are really good at stopping the run.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that is because when we wrote our articles this week, we broke down the interior based on run stopping and pass rushing separately. So just a little taste of what we think about guys who can do both. One of the things that's been interesting about doing these defensive rankings is kind of like how to categorize players. And we have like this terminology of interior D-line, and that includes like 3-4 defensive ends, and then we have our edges, which would include 4-3 defensive ends and outside linebackers in a 3-4. You've got your off-ball linebackers, which is like middle linebackers, and weak side linebackers, and just kind of depending on if you put 3 off-ball linebackers on the field or 2. So there's a lot of complication there, and I think that comes down to like the multiple schemes and the different ways defenses are deployed in the NFL in 2024 or heading into 2024. So just at a high level, Cody, like how do you look at like a defensive coordinator who runs primarily 3-4 versus primarily 4-3? What is it that they think they're getting an advantage at by running one or the other?
Yeah, so the odd front, the 5 down alignment essentially is what it is, that you're plugging all the gaps. This is really good against zone teams, right? Where they're trying to hit you inside. It's good against outside zone because you have solid edges on the outside. So What's really become popular right now is wide zone or outside zone, especially from pistol and under center. Work play action off of that. I am guaranteed that I'm getting a 5-on-5, but also that I have some sort of edge presence, whether it's a boot action, whether it is outside zone. If you want to run inside, I'm plugging your B gaps. Talk to any spread coach at the high school level, and they'll tell you the lifeblood of a spread offense is the B gaps, which is primarily going to be inside zone based. If you cut those off, where's the running back going to go? He's funneled into the A gaps. And even look, outside of like North Dakota State, maybe K-State a little bit, no one runs A-gap power. Like, it's a dying thing. And maybe at the high school level, and I'm sure somebody's listening now says my high school team's running A-gap power, and you're probably in the upper Midwest. But here in Texas, there ain't a lot of A-gap power going on at the 6A, 5A level. It's a lot of horizontal runs, not necessarily getting vertical to A-gap. So that translates even to the NFL. Like Derrick Henry will run through the A-gap, but name me another running back that's like, oh, that guy's just going to hit the A-gap hard. So that's where that goes into. 4 down is really better for pass rush. It's also better for like some of these gap schemes that you see.
Cody is diving so deep into the knowledge archive right now. He's talking upper Midwest high school A-gap runs.
Yeah, I was going to say, Scott, can you just like give me a synopsis of everything Cody just said for the listening public?
I cannot, but I can tell you I played high school football in the lower Midwest, and we were hitting the A-gap hard. That's what I can tell you. Back in, the year 2000.
I think the A-gap was more popular in the year 2000, but it is interesting that you say that. Like, these spread offenses, defenses tend to think they want to be more spread out, but you see a lot of these quarterbacks pulling it and running it right up the middle. So you still have to plug those gaps in the middle.
Yeah, and there's ways of doing this. So, like, I think a good example of this too was like philosophy-wise. You had the Cowboys last year with Mozzie Smith. Mozzie Smith was a definite plugger in Michigan. They wanted him to lose weight. Now they got Zimmer, who runs a little bit different style. They want him to now gain weight back. Depends on if I'm playing a shade or if I'm playing head up. Like, all of this stuff matters in technique on the interior. Mostly interior guys, they're used to just playing on top of a guard or on top of a center and resetting the line of scrimmage. It's the edges that you really start seeing a difference in. Like I mentioned earlier, the 49ers, Texans would be in the same conversation. Jets are in the same conversation with this of like, they want these guys wide. They want fast but solid interior guys, and they're just trying to isolate the tackles as much as possible. And they're trying to do that with 4. And they, I think the Jets have done a better job roster building than the 49ers because their 2 inside guys are monsters. And especially with Quinnen Williams, when you get a Quinnen Williams who probably, like you asked earlier, like who's a true nose that's kind of that Quinnen Williams would be, he should be in your top 5 because he can pass rush. Quarterbacks don't like pressure in their face. So if you can get a guy inside like a Dexter Lawrence or a Quinnen Williams that can really punch that inside and make that quarterback kind of work out, that's when you're really cooking on the front line.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Looking at football from all levels. I love that. I'm looking forward to this next part, this next segment, because I'm hoping Cody will tell me I'm stupid. And by the way, if you think my answers are stupid, feel free to point that out. But what we're going to do, we've been talking about defense for a few weeks now, and we'll be transitioning into offense next week. So I want to take a second to go around. Let's start with breakout players because bounce back is naturally the second in line of this. But breakout players, a player that you think, and we'll exclude rookies here, but a player who maybe hasn't been a superstar in the past that could have a better season than whatever he's had in the past. I'll let Scott go first here.
Yeah, I'm typically breakout requires some type of increased opportunity. And the guy that I'm thinking about is Josh Williams, cornerback for the Kansas City Chiefs. I like what led me down that train is I was actually initially thinking about Trent McDuffie with Snead going to the Tennessee Titans. And then I thought, well, Sasha's going to give me shit because he was an all-pro last year, so I don't know that qualifies as a breakout candidate. But what I envision happening is McDuffie is going to step up and take the lead role, like perhaps play a little bit more outside. Like he will be the big dog in that secondary for the Chiefs. But I think Josh Williams is going to step in and be a lot better of a cover corner, like big body, long arms. He's played a lot. He's played on 2 Super Bowl teams, but kind of in a third or sometimes fourth if you think about Jalen Watson corner role. And so what I think you're going to see is Josh Williams step in, earn that number 2 corner starter role, and I think he's going to be better playing man coverage on guys on the outside than we might think that he's going to be, which hopefully will allow Spags to continue to do some of the things he does with McDuffie, moving him around, playing in the slot that we saw him do when they had L'Jarius Sneed there.
Yeah. We'll know if that's true or not real fast. If we don't hear his name called for a couple of games, provided he's starting, then we'll know he's doing a good job. That's kind of the crux of being a corner, is like when you're on TV a lot, it probably means you're getting smoked. So,
yeah.
But for my sake, I hope you're right, Scott. Cody, do you have anyone in mind?
Yeah, I think somebody who has been on the cusp of a breakout, probably somebody, unless you're just like a football nerd, you don't know who it is, but Martin Emerson Jr. for the Browns, I have a feeling is going to just explode. I think people are going to know who he is by the end of the year. You could actually argue like him and Sauce are kind of the leaders within his class of when they came in. He's going to get ample opportunity to play even more cover 1 this year. I just thought like he really held it down last year when they had some injuries in the secondary. He's somebody who actually we had graded higher than Newsome, which a lot of people love Newsome with the Browns. So this is somebody who last year was top 10 in cover 3. He was number 1, or he's a top 20 player in coverage that we had last year, and he's top 20 in man coverage. So basically what the Browns do, he's really, really good at. And I think he's going to get more opportunities now that everybody's healthy, and we're going to see him. I think people are going to start knowing his name.
Cody loves Emerson Island.
I do. Emerson Island.
Emerson Island. It sounds a lot like a bar I go to.
Takes his kids there in the off season.
Scott, that sounds just like a bar I go to in my hometown.
Yeah,
except
it does. Do they have car bombs?
Shout out Emerson Biggins. Yeah, they do. Absolutely. $5 on Sundays. Okay, I'll go real quick with a breakout player. I hope you guys feel like this qualifies as a breakout player. Some might argue that he already broke out last year, but I think there's still room for growth. Jermaine Johnson for the Jets. First of all, Hassan Reddick still hasn't reported to camp, so there might be a lot of opportunity there, and that's a guy they were counting on. So they're going to need him on the edge. He ranked 173rd in our raw havoc ratings in his rookie season. And if you'll remember, he was kind of like, he was a late first round pick for him, the second or third of their first round picks that year. So not a ton of attention on him, but still like first round pedigree. Last year, he jumped all the way up to 14th in raw havoc from 173rd his rookie year. He only had 2.5 sacks in that rookie year. He had 7.5 last year. So I think like his college career kind of followed a similar arc. He started at Georgia. He was okay there, but like ended up at Florida State, and I think was ACC Defensive Player of the Year his last year at Florida State, and it kind of took him a while to like acclimate to that level. And we could see something similar in the NFL. Now, Cody, tell me I'm stupid.
No, I actually that's really good. I didn't even think he's someone I hadn't even thought about. I think the Jets have an opportunity to have one of the best defenses in the NFL next year if everything goes correctly.
I mean,
a big part of that.
You dig into those havoc spreadsheets and start sorting by individual years. You see some interesting stuff in there.
Even though I wanted to hear Cody tell you were stupid, I'm jealous by that. Look at you using math and the spreadsheet to give you insights. Like that's a good call.
I mean, using math to give me insights is about my best chance out here. So let's transition this into like guys who maybe have already shown flashes of being at least close to star type players and then fell off and then could come back, our bounce back players. I'll let Cody go first this time.
I'm actually going to say this is something that like I feel like people don't want to believe, but like Pat Surtain did not have a good season last year at all. And it's funny when we released some of our cornerback stuff, I'm getting like, if you don't have it, you must not watch film. Like, oh, where's Pat Surtain?
You don't know ball, bro.
Yeah, I don't know ball, even though I'm a huge Broncos fan. I watch every game.
Look forward to that segment during the season, the mean tweet segment. Yeah.
Right. But to me, it's like he really struggled last year. If you really look at it too, like we had him, I think 20th in coverage last year, and people are mad at us. PFF had him at 75th. 75th. I had to like scroll to the second page to find him. So I think when you really break it down, really good at man coverage. I think we all know that. But he struggled for whatever reason. Maybe it was just the transition to Vance Joseph. Maybe it was just he didn't trust the people that he was playing with. On the other side, he was traveling a lot last year too. He moved around. I don't know what it was. He was still okay above average in cover 3, but he was just terrible when they ran cover 2. Vance Joseph is a big 5-man pressure cover 2 guy, trap 2 guy. So I think maybe there was a little bit of a Fangio hangover. And I just see him, he's too talented and he's too good to have back-to-back years where he just doesn't produce at an elite level. I mean, last year he wasn't an all-pro for a reason. He was an all-pro as a rookie and in his second year. I mean, there's a reason why he kind of fell off, but he's my comeback player for sure.
Yeah, I actually had him on like written down, but I had a feeling you were going to go that direction, so I wrote another guy down as well. But I'll go second. I'll let Scott close this one out before we transition. I have a guy who joined the Lions this offseason, Marcus Davenport. Dealt with a high ankle sprain last year. Didn't even register on our Havoc ratings for 2023. But if you look back to 2021 on the Saints, he was 14th in raw Havoc overall, fell all the way to 107th in 2022. And I think the Lions are a team, and he'll be opposite Aiden Hutchinson. The Lions are a team hungry to improve on defense and like be better on that side of the ball this year. And maybe I'm maybe he's just too long in the tooth and it's never coming back. But it's a guy who's shown flashes before. I don't think we're not looking at like an all-pro, probably not a Pro Bowler, but a guy who could be a really useful piece on a Lions defense this year.
Yeah. And Sasha, it's interesting that, and I'll go quick because I know we want to move along. It's interesting you went to Davenport because the guy I had in mind is the guy who is replacing him in New Orleans, which is Chase Young. And that Chase Young at one point, and I believe it was his, let me just make sure I'm not lying, but I believe his 2022 or 2021 Havoc rating was off the charts, one of the best in the league. And I think everyone had him penciled in in that group of elite pass rushers. And we've since given up on him, right? From last year in the playoffs and even into the Super Bowl. He's barely a replacement level type end. I think he's heard all of that. I think he's going to go into a Saints defense where you have pass rushers who've had success in the past. You've got Cameron Jordan opposite him, right? You had a guy like Trey Hendrickson that flourished in that defense. And as much as I don't think the Saints are going to be a great team, their defense is always top 10. And Dennis Allen has always been a good defensive coach. So I think Chase Young comes in with a chip on his shoulder into a defense that has a lot of pieces around him and has a little bit of a comeback year.
Yeah, that's a really solid call out of a former number 2 overall pick. The pedigree's there, the talent's there, all the tools are there. It's just putting it all together. And also production was there at one point.
Yeah. I was also going to say I knew 100% that Cody was picking a DB, so I steered clear of DBs.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm not biased at all.
100%. I think that that kind of wraps up our defensive conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about do you guys want to give a couple of quick breakout teams or teams that you think could be better on defense this year?
Can I? Do we have time?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to give you a bounce back team and a breakout team. I don't know if the breakout team qualifies, but for bounce back, I'm going Philadelphia Eagles. They were horrendous last year on defense. I think 30th in the league in terms of total EPA allowed. They were really good the year before, as we know, went to the Super Bowl. They invested a massive amount of resources, both in free agency and in the draft, on their defense this year. They brought in Devin White at linebacker. They brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson, Bryce Huff on the edge, and they drafted 2 corners, right? Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And perhaps the most important thing is they bring in Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator. So I see them as a team that will bounce back and have a substantially better defense than they did. And then on the breakout, this shouldn't be surprising, but the Seattle Seahawks, like, new head coach, the darling of the defensive coordinator world right now, right? Like Mike McDonald is his tree is the one growing the fastest on the defensive side, and they like that defense they weren't good last year, but they have good players, right? They brought in Leonard Williams, they brought in Javon Baker and Tyrell Dodson, who we know from our Havoc ratings is a really good coverage linebacker. To go along with 2 new safeties, Kayvon Wallace, Rayshon Jenkins, and corners that are good and versatile, right? Particularly with Devin Witherspoon, and then I don't know, Tariq Woolen. So like they have so much talent with a new energy and a new head coach who is a kind of a defensive savant. So I would expect them to be top 10 in a lot of different defensive categories this year.
Yeah, I like your pick, Scott. I think the Eagles, for sure, they finally just went out and hired the guy that they wanted to hire originally. And it was they finally got him to go there. I don't think a lot of people realized, but when Gannon in that Super Bowl run against the Chiefs, he was actually kind of a consultant for that defense that entire year. So he has ties with Philadelphia. He decided he wanted to go to Miami. That didn't work out. Now he's going to go back. He'll be with a more traditionalist at offensive coordinator, which I think helps his personality. He's also kind of an East Coast guy. I like the picks that they had. So everything you said is awesome. And I do love the Seattle pick as well. I think the safety room is what can be really versatile for what he wants in there. What I would say, and what I've told like Seahawks guys, is that they're a corner away from being really good on defense. So I like your picks. I'll just go out with, I think, a team that will break out, that will start maybe not necessarily going to push for the playoffs, but you'll start looking at them in a different light as the Panthers. They went out and basically got Evero guys. And I really like Evero. I thought he did a really good job. He worked under Raheem Morris. He did a really good job with the Rams. Then he goes to the Broncos. I thought he did a tremendous job with the Broncos, especially with all the turmoil that they had with Nathaniel Hackett. He was able to keep that that defense as a top 10 defense with all the craziness, losing Chubb to the day, all that stuff. I think I could see them pushing to be a top 15, top 10. We're starting to think of them as a better defense. I think the Jaguars are a defense to look at the end of the year, could potentially be a top 5 defense. They completely collapsed on the back half of last year, and that's why they fired Patrick Graham. And Peterson said that from the end. Too many missed tackles, too many busts. They're getting a guy who comes from the Saints tree. He already showed in Atlanta that he can add a little bit of pass rush, that he can do a little bit more coverage versatility. They signed Tyson Campbell, who was oft injured, who Havoc Rate kind of likes him, even though he had a really down year. But they have the potential to really rise up. That's a team that I could see going from middle class to elite, and then from the bottom of the basement to pushing above average.
Yeah, I actually had the Jaguars written down with Ryan Nielsen coming in from the Falcons. The other team that I wrote down, and maybe this is just wishful thinking for the sake of their fans because their offense has been really good, but they did bring in a defensive coordinator from the Ravens and Anthony Weaver, and have had some personnel changes. The Dolphins could potentially play some better defense this season. So those are the two I wrote down, the Jaguars and Dolphins. I won't give a ton of context because we're running low on time. But that's kind of our thoughts on defense over the course of the last 3 weeks. As we transition through the offseason, next week we're going to start talking more about offense. And with offense comes another metric. We've been talking a ton about Havoc ratings. You've been hearing all about them and learning what those are. wait for the threat ratings next week. And I'll just give Scott the floor just for a second to talk a little bit about threat ratings, and we'll be dropping an article early next week that goes into detail about how they're calculated.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time. If you liked Havoc ratings, you're really going to like threat ratings because they are the exact same thing, but obviously on offense. Defensive players create havoc. They're trying to combat offensive players who are a threat to score. And threat ratings have the same advantages. They are based on the outcomes that players actually generate on the field, and they're based on the math that's behind what actually helps teams win. So look for that. They're going to be really good. They give us a ton of insight into just like our defensive havoc ratings, what players are specifically good at on the field. So should be a good time. And I know that the offensive side of the ball is a little bit sexier than the defensive side.
Yeah. And one thing I'll just call out, that we're going to approach offense from the standpoint of tiers a little bit. So obviously we have our rankings and we have our 1 through 10 and all of that, but we'll kind of give you where those dividing lines are, where like this group of players, they do one thing and this group of players does another thing. The other nice thing is we have cuts on threat rate. So we know like what receivers are better against zone, what are better against man, what quarterbacks are great against the blitz and not against the blitz, what running backs are good behind the line of scrimmage in the pass game versus down the field. So it's going to be really unique content coming out, and we look forward to talking about it next week on the pod. Cody, you got anything to add for the people before I sign us off?
I think you will be really interested in the way that we look at quarterbacks. I think we're doing it a little bit different than everybody else is doing it. And I think also, too, with the receivers, we're really isolating players instead of kind of factoring in other people's production into what they're doing. So I think people will be very interested in our quarterback ratings.
Yeah, awesome. The offseason rolls on, 35 days till the first game on the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. We appreciate you listening as always. Visit us at fieldvisionsports.com. Sign up for our email list. Go to Twitter or X, as they call it, at FieldVisionMI, at FieldVisionSports on Instagram. We look forward to having you follow us all over the place, and the app will be launching soon before the season starts. So look forward to having everybody subscribe to that as well. You've been listening to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. We'll see you next time. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. We appreciate you joining the movement that is Field Vision Sports, the analytics platform built specifically for you, the fan. We look forward to taking you through this football season and beyond, and be sure to tell all your friends.